Property law supplies the legal framework for allocating resources and distributing wealth. Rather than a static set of rules, it functions as an economic system designed to move goods toward their most efficient use. We can observe the foundational logic of this system through a simple exchange, the sale of a used car. In this scenario, Adam owns a Chevy he values at $3,000. Blair has $5,000 in cash and values the car at $4,000. If they fail to agree, their combined threat values remain $8,000. But if Adam sells the car to Blair, the asset moves to a party who values it more, creating a cooperative surplus of $1,000. Because this is a voluntary exchange, a reasonable solution is for the parties to split that surplus. If Blair pays Adam $3,500, Adam receives his threat value plus $500, and Blair gains a car worth $4,000 for a net gain of $500. This bargaining model provides a template for analyzing how cooperation can create value by shifting a resource from someone who values it less to someone who values it more. Under this theory, national wealth increases when the legal system provides mechanisms that move resources into the hands of the people who value them most. Scaling this logic from a single car to an entire society requires a system that can guarantee these cooperative surpluses on a mass scale. Consider a state of nature where people must divide their limited resources between farming, stealing, and defending their land. In this environment, time spent patrolling a perimeter is time lost for raising crops. To increase total production, parties can enter a social contract, mutually recognizing property rights to end the cycle of theft and defense. While this serves as an economic parable rather than a literal history, it illustrates why societies are motivated to create property laws. By establishing a central government to enforce these rights, a society achieves economies of scale. Taxes used to fund a single legal system are often lower than the individual costs of private defense. This transition allows a society to redirect resources from fighting to production, capturing a surplus that increases total security and wealth. We can test the limits of this system using a boundary dispute between a cattle rancher and a neighboring corn farmer. The law could assign responsibility in two ways: ranchers' rights, where the farmer must keep cattle out, or farmers' rights, where the rancher must keep cattle in. Conventional views of fairness typically suggest that because the cows caused the harm, the rancher should be liable for the damage. If cattle do $100 of damage, a rancher's fence costs $75, while a farmer's fence costs $50. If bargaining is free, they reach this efficient outcome regardless of the law. A liable rancher simply pays the farmer $50 to build the fence, saving money. This is the Coase Theorem. When transaction costs are zero, an efficient use of resources results from private bargaining, regardless of legal property rights. It is worth noting that while the outcome is efficient, the specific distribution of wealth changes. A rancher with more legal rights is wealthier and may shift their demand for goods, subtly altering how land is used in the long run. In a world with zero transaction costs, rational bargaining ensures that resources are used efficiently, making the specific choice of law irrelevant to the final outcome. In reality, bargaining is rarely free. It is hindered by the frictions of searching for partners, negotiating, and enforcing agreements. A bargain only occurs if the cooperative surplus is greater than these transaction costs. If negotiating a $50 fence costs $60, the parties won't trade. The normative Coase theorem suggests that when bargaining is difficult, the law should be structured to remove impediments to private agreements, lowering these costs to lubricate the exchange. Conversely, the normative Hobbes theorem suggests that if bargaining costs are too high to overcome, the law should allocate rights directly to the party who values them most. This creates a decision tree for the legal system. If the transaction costs for the parties are lower than the court's cost of gathering information, the court can follow precedent and let the parties trade. If the court can determine the efficient allocation more cheaply than the parties can negotiate it, the court may choose to assign the right directly to the highest valuer. Using these principles, a legal system can minimize the harm of social friction by deciding whether to facilitate private trade or forcefully allocate the resource. This friction-based model also determines how rights are enforced, as seen in a dispute between a polluting electric company and a commercial laundry. We calculate profits based on actions. Smoke imposes an external cost on the laundry, reducing profits unless scrubbers or filters are installed. Joint profits change depending on the rule: $1,200 for free pollution, $1,100 for damages, and $800 for an injunction. To choose the most efficient remedy, the court can apply the Calabresi-Melamite framework, which relies on the density of transaction costs. When transaction costs are low, as with two neighboring businesses, courts typically use injunctions. A clear property rule forces the parties to negotiate an efficient settlement. However, if the pollution affects thousands of dispersed residents, the cost of coordinating a negotiation becomes completely prohibitive. In these high-friction cases, the court shifts to a liability rule, ordering damages. This allows the factory to continue operating while forcing it to pay for the harm it causes. The choice between an order to stop and an order to pay is a calculated response to the transaction costs inherent in the dispute. If property law is focused on efficiency, we must ask how the system addresses social justice and wealth inequality. Lawmakers are often tempted to use property rulings to redistribute wealth, such as favoring a poor farmer over a wealthy rancher. This approach often fails because of the capitalization effect. When a legal rule shifts costs from one group to another, those costs are quickly reflected in the value of the land itself. If the law favors a farmer, the landlord may simply raise the rent. The farmer gains no net wealth, while the intended redistribution is absorbed by the property market. This is a central theme of the second fundamental theorem of welfare economics. The theorem argues that allocative efficiency and distributional equity are separate problems that require different tools. If a society intends to redistribute wealth, it is generally more efficient to use broad-based progressive taxation rather than reshaping property law. Progressive taxation can target inequality directly without distorting the incentives and allocations within the property system. Efficiency is maximized when property law focuses on minimizing transaction costs and allocating rights clearly, providing a stable foundation for the creation of national wealth.